Radioactivity, particularly radioactivity utilized in malignancy treatment and demonstrative testing, spares the lives of thousands of individuals consistently. Notwithstanding, radiation is likewise dangerous to people when not took care of appropriately. Huge mishaps and fiascos, similar to the Chernobyl atomic reactor blast and the Fukushima Japan atomic force plant calamity, get the features and, legitimately, make the open anxious about the utilization of radioactive fuel to produce power in atomic force plants. Be that as it may, less normally detailed are little episodes where a few people, perhaps handfuls, are uncovered. Now and again, a couple of these individuals pass on because of unplanned presentation to high radiation levels. Sadly, a large number of these episodes, however not all, happen in immature nations, through the reusing and offer of scrap metal. Others are identified with mechanical mishaps, and even clinical treatment mistakes. Be that as it may, all can possibly open clueless people to radiation. Recorded in sequential request, here are 10 additional instances of catastrophes including radioactive materials that brought about death. 10. Ciudad Juarez Incident. Omobono 1 in December 1983 to February 1984, in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, and the United States, happened one of the main generally announced instances of radiation presentation from the unintentional devastation of stranded sources through the piece metal reusing process. On December 6, 1983, a pre-owned metal teletherapy unit, imagined, containing a source holder with around 6,000, 1 mm pellets, each with radioactive cobalt-60, was intentionally opened in a piece yard in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. The pellets were dissipated all through the piece yard, and an attractive loader further scattered the radioactive pellets, when the piece metal was changed over to steel items on December 10, 1983. Debased items included steel rebar and table platforms, made from the tainted steel and sent to the U.S. The tainting went undetected until January 16, 1984, when a truck conveying the sullied rebar messed up at the Los Alamos, New Mexico, Logical Research Center and set off a programmed radiation sensor. Later that equivalent day, 5 additional trucks conveying defiled steel were halted at the Mexican fringe, close to El Paso, Texas. Over the next weeks, around 900 tons of polluted steel were distinguished and recouped in the U.S. A portion of the debased table parts had just been made into completed tables and must be recovered from restaurants. In February 1984, Mexican authorities confirmed that 10 people had been presented to significant levels of radiation. One of these therefore kicked the bucket from their wounds. An airborne study of the Ciudad Juarez territory in March of that year found 21 tainted zones incorporating a pickup truck with kids playing on it. In Sonora, Mexico, specialists needed to annihilate 109 homes that had been worked with the tainted rebar. 9. Morocco Incident. Radiation 512x384. Another stranded source occasion happened in March 1984, in Morocco. This time the stranded source was an iridium-132 source. Numerous people got critical overdoses of radiation that necessary clinical consideration, and 8 individuals died. The source was utilized to radiograph welds, a non-ruinous investigation where ionizing radiation is utilized to search for abscons in the metal that can't be seen some other way. The source got isolated from the protected holder used to store it, and the source itself had no markings showing it was radioactive. By one way or another, a laborer found the source and took it home, where it remained for certain weeks, presenting the family to radiation. 8. Goiânia Incident. Radiotherapy treatment. On September 13, 1987, at Goiânia, Brazil, a radioactive source was expelled from a deserted emergency clinic in the city. After some time, the radioactive source was taken care of by numerous individuals, and prompted the introduction to elevated levels of radiation of at any rate 245 individuals. 20 of those gave indication of radiation introduction and required emergency clinic treatment. In any event, 4 individuals died. This time it was a cesium-137 source, which had been abandoned when a private radiotherapy establishment moved to another area. Left unbound for a long time, it was inevitably situated by scrap trackers searching for metal. Not comprehending what they had, the foragers took the unit home, attempted to open it and all the while, harmed the cesium-137 source. This prompted the tainting of many individuals just as the Earth, which brought about a 6-month radiation tidy-up. In excess of 100,000 individuals wound up being observed for radiation as a result. 7. Sorek incident. Stervel 513X350 radioactive sources have numerous utilizations, and not only for clinical purposes. One such use is cleansing of clinical instruments, and even food items. A high-vitality cobalt-60 radioactive source was being utilized at simply such a plant in Sorek, Israel, in June 1990, when the source utilized in the light procedure got stuck in its rack. 2 clashing admonition signs were given to the administrator of the light machine, which may have befuddled him. He avoided the well-being frameworks intended to keep an administrator from being uncovered, and thought of methodology with the goal that he could go into the illumination room and free the blockage. Thus, the administrator went into the room and was, himself, lighted. He was presented to significant levels of radiation and passed on just a month later. Tragically, this was not the first, nor would it be the last episode including a source which had gotten stuck in such a facility. In February 1989, in San Salvador, El Salvador, a cobalt-60 source got stuck and once more, laborers avoided security frameworks and went into the illumination room. This time, 3 men went into the space to free the stuck source. Simultaneously, every one of the 3 got high dosages of radiation. The legs and feet of 2 of the men were so singed by the radiation that they must be removed. The 3rd man kicked the bucket a half-year later, in October 1991, in Nesvizh, Belarus. A cobalt-60 source got stuck in the item transport framework and the administrator entered the office to clear the blockage, bypassing a few security frameworks. The source got dynamic for around 1 moment and the administrator was presented to elevated levels of radiation. Therefore, he was taken for unique clinical treatment in Minsk, Russia, however kicked the bucket 113 days after the fact. 6. Zaragoza Clinic Incident. 2004 Clínica Zaragoza at an emergency clinic center situated in Zaragoza, Spain, between the dates of December 10 and December 20, 1990. In any event, 27 patients who were accepting radiotherapy for malignant growth were unintentionally presented to significant levels of radiation, which brought about the passings of 11 patients, and serious wounds to the others. On December 7, 1990, support was performed on the electron quickening agent used to treat disease patients at the facility. The unit was begun again the next day, December 10. The Spanish Nuclear Safety Board investigated the unit, and found the intensity of the electron quickening agent was set excessively high, and it was removed from administration on December 20, 1990. Be that as it may, by at that point, numerous patients had been presented to higher than anticipated, and hazardous, levels of radiation. The influenced patients promptly endured skin consumes and impacts to interior organs and their bone marrow. The principal persistent kicked the bucket on February 16, 1991. The keep-going casualty happened on December 25, 1991. The multi-year-old instrument had a breakdown in the electron bar quickening agent control framework. The administration man who fixed the instrument inaccurately expanded yield power, so patients that ought to have gotten treatment at 7 million electron volts (MeV) were rather treated at 40 MeV. The medical clinic director accused the professional, and the Spanish health minister accused GE, the maker of the instrument. After a court hearing, the professional and GE were seen as to blame. The gadget was removed from administration and discarded, in 1996.5. Indiana, PA incident. Brachytherapy. In November 1992, a multi-year-old patient was experiencing brachytherapy radiotherapy treatment at the Indiana, Pennsylvania, Regional Cancer Center. While experiencing treatment, a 3.7 Curie iridium-192 source ousted from the hardware and was inadvertently left inside the patient. The mistake went unnoticed in light of the fact that the staff didn't direct routine stock checks of every radioactive source. The patient kicked the bucket 93 hours after the fact, at her nursing home, from introduction to radiation from the source. The catheter containing the source was expelled from the lady and discarded as typical clinical waste. The Waste Removal Organization found the radioactive source during routine checks for radioisotopes. The ensuing Nuclear Regulatory Commission (NRC) examination found that 94 people at the middle, the nursing home and the waste removal organization had been presented to radiation. 4. Tomikyu Incident. Image 778. In October 1994, in Tomikyu, Estonia, 3 siblings some way or another figured out how to get access into an office used to store radioactive waste. They had no approval to enter this office. Inside they found a metal compartment and expelled it from the office. Inside the metal holder was a radioactive source. They had the option to open the compartment and open themselves to the radiation from the source. The radiation presentation executed one of the 3 siblings, and prompted the introduction of numerous others. From the start the man's passing was not connected to radiation introduction. In any case, after analyzing the radiation wounds of another relative, a doctor acknowledged they were completely identified with radioactivity. The doctor alarmed specialists who had the option to contain the harm from being more awful than it in any case would have been. 3. San Juan de Dios Hospital Incident. San Juan de Dios. In August 1996, a radioactive cobalt-60 source was supplanted in an Alcion-2 radiotherapy instrument, at the San Juan de Dios Hospital, in San Juan, Costa Rica. A blunder was made in figuring the portion rate when the instrument was restarted. Before the blunder was trapped in September 1996, 115 patients who had been dealt with utilizing the instrument had been presented to altogether more elevated levels of radiation than anticipated. Later computations would assess the overintroduction at 50 to 60% more prominent degrees of radiation than intended. By July 1997, 9 months after the mishap, 42 of those patients had kicked the bucket. The entirety of the patients gave exemplary indications and manifestations of overintroduction to radiation. 2. Samit Prakarn Incident. BHP-1. The gadget engaged with this episode was a GAMMATRON-3 teletherapy unit, initially introduced in a Bangkok, Thailand, clinic, in 1969. The tele-treatment unit has a source holder and shield produced using lead, and encompassed by tempered steel. It weighed around 280 pounds. In the focal point of the holder was the cobalt-60 source. The tele-treatment unit had been removed from administration by the clinic numerous years already, and had been away, alongside a few different bits of radioactive hardware, in another area. In the end, 3 of these units were moved to a carport, and it was there that the one tele-treatment unit was taken available to be purchased as scrap metal. On January 24, 2000, 2 men bought the tele-treatment unit as scrap metal, and drove it through Bangkok to their home. On February 1, 2000, these 2 men, alongside a third man, attempted to pry separated the unit yet were ineffective. They at that point surrendered and chose to take the unit to a piece yard. Alongside a 4th man, they drove the unit to the piece yard, however first halted at one man's home. While there, one of the men sitting in the vehicle hung his one leg over the unit. At the piece yard, the men asked the piece yard representative to utilize a light to cut open the unit, which he did. A second representative of this piece yard was situated behind the worker who utilized the light to cut exhaust of the tempered steel box and lead chamber. A yellow, noxious smoke originated from the unit and 2 pieces dropped out onto the ground. The man with the light got in them. The man said his hands felt irritated while holding the pieces. The female proprietor of the piece yard came out and requested the men to return the unit to their home, and keep chipping away at it there. They put the presently cut open tele-treatment unit once more into their vehicle and drove back home. Despite the fact that they started to feel wiped out and sick, they managed to at long last separate the hardened steel and lead congregations, and came back with them to the piece yard the following day. In absolute, the 4 men who had gotten the tele-treatment unit, and 6 individuals at the piece yard, including the man who cut it open with a light, the man working close to him, the female proprietor, her better half and 2 others were presented to elevated levels of radiation. By mid-February all had created indications of radiation affliction, and had been admitted to hospitals. The treating doctor saw the individuals were experiencing clear radiation introduction, and reached Thailand specialists who dispatched 2 well-being physicists to examine. Utilizing a radiation meter and passing through the zone close to the piece yard, they in the long run saw higher than typical radiation levels and decided the area of the radioactive source. Shockingly, the source was covered in among huge amounts of other piece metal. Specialists at that point spent numerous days cautiously expelling bits of scrap metal until they were at long last ready to find the real source and securely evacuate it. They likewise found and held onto control of the other tele-treatment units sitting unprotected in the garage. Of the 4 men who initially took care of the unit, one needed to have body parts removed and the other, who had his leg over the unit, had extreme radiation consumes to the leg. In any case, all survived. Of the 6 people uncovered at the piece yard, the man who cut open the unit and the man who worked close to him both kicked the bucket. What's more, the spouse of the piece yard proprietor passed on of his injuries. 1. Mayapuri incident. 24 India 01 Span article large in April 2010, the territory of Mayapuri, India, was influenced by a genuine radiological mishap when a gamma cell 220 research irradiator, possessed by Delhi University, was sold at closeout to a piece metal seller in Mayapuri, on February 26, 2010. The source, unused since 1985, had been expelled from the college and auctions office scrap, therefore turning out to be what is known as a vagrant source. Exacting principles and guidelines require proprietors of radioactive sources to consistently know where the source is found, and never lose control of the source. This didn't occur in the Mayapuri occasion, and vagrant sources, as we have seen, are conceivably deadly. The cobalt-60 radioactive source was cut into a few pieces by the piece metal laborers, one of whom took a piece and put it in his wallet. 2 additional pieces were taken to a close-by shop, and the staying 8 pieces were left in the piece yard. All of the bits of the source were inevitably recuperated in mid-April, and sent to an atomic force station. Because of cutting the source into pieces, 8 individuals were hospitalized because of radiation presentation, and 1 died. Plus. Yanango incident. 136542120 I incorporated the Yanango episode despite the fact that, to the extent I have had the option to decide, the uncovered man has not yet passed on. In any case, the degree of his wounds are so extreme there is little uncertainty that on the off chance that he is as yet alive, he will in the long incredible an outcome. In the event that you might want to peruse the full examination report by the IAEA, go here. Be cautioned, the photos of the man's wounds are incredibly realistic. In February 1999, a hydroelectric plant was under development in Yanango, Peru, a few hundred miles east of Lima, Peru. On the morning of February 20, 1999, a welder and his collaborator started to lead fixes on a channel. Before long a radiographer showed up to take radiographs of the welds and the funnel so as to guarantee the channel was sheltered to lead hydrostatic testing. In any case, the welding was not yet completed, so the radiographer left, leaving the radiograph camera, bolted yet unaided, at the development site. The camera is basically a metal box with a source ponytail, which is a pencil length since quite a while ago twisted metal connector that takes a gander at all like something anybody would think contains radioactivity. Actually, the source braid contained an iridium-192 radioactive source. The braid is embedded into the camera with one end jutting somewhat. That finish of the source ponytail is then associated with drive cable. The welders continued their work. Before long the radiographer went to utilize the camera, yet it fizzled. By one way or another, the ponytail dropped out of the camera. There were secures that ought to have kept this from occurring, yet, the braid dropped out. The radiographer left the building site and, not knowing the risk, one of the welders got the braid with his correct hand and put it in his back right pocket. The welder kept on working for an additional 3 hours, at that point boarded a transport with different laborers and returned home. Before he went home he started to see an agony in his privileged thigh. At home the man grumbled to his significant other about the torment and removed his jeans. The spouse saw a red spot on his thigh and the man went to a nearby specialist who revealed to him he had a bug chomp. While he was gone the spouse breastfed their newborn child kid and 2 other small kids played in the territory where the jeans, and the ponytail in the pocket, were laying on the floor. Once back home the man recalled the braid he had gotten and acknowledged it was still in his back pocket of his jeans. He removed the ponytail from his pocket with his correct hand and conveyed it outside to the toilet. Afterward, the plant administrator went to the man's home inquiring as to whether he had seen the missing source. The man went to the latrine, got the ponytail with his correct hand, and conveyed it back to the house to show the administrator. After observing the braid in his grasp, the administrator advised the man to hurl it into the road. Later the braid was securely recovered and the road and house sterilized. Be that as it may, it was past the point of no return for the welder. After forceful treatment in Peru, the man was traveled to France for the absolute most forefront treatment accessible. All things considered, by February 2000, 1 year after the occurrence, the man had lost his whole right leg and butt cheek and had huge contamination in different territories of his body, including his left leg and right hand. Likewise, from sitting on his jeans, his better half had a little radioactive consume on her butt cheek.